Prime Minister Carney says his government is signing a partnership with Germany to develop critical minerals in Canada. The other development is about a big military spending program. Canada is looking to replace its aging fleet of subs, and this is a project potentially worth tens of billions of dollars. Carney is announcing this morning a giant German shipyard will be one of two finalists.
The German-Norwegian partnership is one of the two finalists for this, consistent with the cooperation potential that we have, and consistent with Canada fully fulfilling its responsibilities on all three of our coasts.
Prime Minister Carney will be touring the German shipyard with National Defence Minister David McGuinty, and Industry Minister Melanie Joly will have coverage of that when he arrives in Kiel later on this morning. Evan Dyer is our reporter covering the Prime Minister's mission in Europe, and he has more now on the context for today's announcements.
Canada, too, is looking to acquire new military equipment, and one of the biggest ticket items that Canada will ever buy in defence, or has ever bought in defence, is to renew its submarine fleet. Of course, Canada bought 4 used British submarines almost 30 years ago, did not have a good experience with those boats. They rapidly ran into problems, and currently at least 2 of them are out of operation at any given moment. And so Canada is now looking to not only renew that fleet, but also expand it to a dozen submarines. There had been 4 contenders in the running: a German-Norwegian consortium, South Korean company, a Spanish and a Swedish company. Today we learned that field has narrowed to just 2. The German-Norwegian consortium, ThyssenKrupp, and the South Korean company, Hanwha Ocean. Later today, the Prime Minister will visit the ThyssenKrupp shipyard in Kiel, Germany, and look at its operations, but he also wants to assure the South Koreans that he's not being a favoritist, so he added that he will visit them as well in October. This purchase is a big one. We're talking about submarines that cost somewhere in the range of $2 billion each. That's the price the South Koreans are talking about. The German one is widely presumed to be slightly more expensive even.
Well, that's interesting. That was from August. Ladies and gentlemen, the Liberal government has scammed you again, each and every single one of you. They started with the seniors, scamming them about Donald Trump during the election campaign. And now they've got a scam budget for you as well. Okay, buckle up, because we're going to tear this apart today. We are ripping open the stall. We are pulling out the bones, and we are exposing exactly what is going on with the Carney Liberals' budget this year. They want you to think that they are boldly boosting defense, boldly investing in Canada's future. You saw it there with the submarine tours, boldly delivering. But underneath it all, it's a shell game. It's smoke. It's flattery. And in one glaring example, the rapid boat tour of submarines by Mark Carney, that one you just watched from August, while not a cent has been budgeted for them in this budget, proof right here from CTV, they demonstrated exactly what a scam this is. Let's go.
Welcome to Bakes on Things.
Welcome back to Bakes on Things. It's the first sip for your Monday, and it's a feisty one, folks, because, well, first of all, like, subscribe, comment, the usual. But Mark Carney has toured shipyards overseas. He has climbed into these German submarine production lines. He's visited now South Korea recently and stepped into a KSS-3 submarine meant to woo Canada's future contract. They eliminated 2 parties. According to recent reporting, Canada is looking to buy up to 12 of these things, 12 conventional diesel-electric submarines for the Royal Canadian Navy. Well, that's a $2 billion a pop. The procurement is expected to possibly go over $100 billion. And yet, in the 2025 budget, the so-called Canada Strong budget, it allocated $0, not 1, for the subs. Now, why is that? Well, the government says the quotes aren't in yet. We don't have a price. We can't book the funding. But experts say that's dysfunctional and baloney. You've already eliminated 2 suitors. Any procurement of this magnitude should have a ballpark figure. In fact, those 2 suitors you eliminated probably quoted you one. There should be a placeholder in this budget for that, but without that, there is no source of funds. This isn't prudence, it's obfuscation. They're leaving it out, and there's a good reason. Let's listen to the experts first, though. So David Perry, yesterday, of the Canadian Global Affairs Institute, told CTV this. He said, at this point, they should have an initial idea of roughly what the budget is for these submarines. Technically, there is no budget and no source of funds to buy a submarine in the Canada Strong budget. So what in the hell is going on here? Well, it's one of two things, both of which mean you're being scammed. Either the government cannot estimate the cost, which is ridiculous given the size of a submarine project, or the government intentionally omitted the subs and the cost of the subs so that the budget didn't get to a $100 billion deficit, right? $2 billion a sub. That brings us to the next section on this, because that means you're being scammed again. To make sure that they can surprise you with a $78 billion deficit, which is still terrible, they make glaring omissions like this one. If you dig into the budget of Canada strong, supposedly, there are many promising headlines in there, in fact. Last week, we were told there's infrastructure rolling out, there's defense spending increasing, there's productivity boosts in this budget. On it went. Canada strong, and we kept the deficit at $78 billion. But when you look at the fine print, many of those major promises made in the lead up to the budget and during the election campaign are missing, or they're underfunded. Here are some of those biggest ones. Well, we've got this one, the submarine fleet, promised, hyped, not a single dollar earmarked in the budget for it. Not one. The guy has toured submarines as recently as a few weeks ago. The broader pledge to spend up to 5% of GDP on defense by 2035 under the new NATO target, the budget commits to hit 2% of GDP this year, which we know that was promised too. Yes, that appears. But now how do you get to 5% by 2035, especially with not a single dollar budgeted toward these submarines? The cost of living crisis, meanwhile, is also missing. Scant provisions for ordinary households struggling with inflation, housing, rent, groceries. One credible analysis flags all of that. They flagged that the poverty reduction barely receives mention. Long-term care is missing. Well, cuts to tree planting are in there, foreign aid. There's a whole bunch of mess in there. Staffing and service delivery, well, the budget reduces the size of the federal civil service by 10% by 2028-2029. So while giving massive defense and infrastructure spending, supposedly, they're not going to be able to put people behind it. If the government is actually serious about serving Canadians, how does removing service capacity square with that? And don't get me wrong, public service is bloated and out of control. But based on what they're trying to tell you, it doesn't make sense. The lack of concrete cost estimates for major procurements like this, aircraft, ships, submarines, all mentioned, but no line item funding at this stage at all. Meaning, either the government expects to ramp up later, which is not what the promise was, or they want to defer the political cost of making the deficit bigger. In short, big headlines, small detail, promises, but lacking binding numbers. The budget looks like a blueprint filled with ellipses rather than figures. This is truly a mess. This is a scam, and the Liberals are getting very, very good at scamming Canadians. They know that if they just make the big headlines, they might win. Did they leave things out so that the deficit didn't hit $100 billion? Well, let's be blunt on all of this. Yes. From what we can see, this budget carries all the hallmarks of a political budget, not a strategic one where they have endeavored not to fall as a government. It tries to have it both ways, announce grand ambitions like a defense surge, infrastructure boom, but not fully fund that yet, or at all in this case. The result, the deficit projection's still large, but $78 billion stays way below what we were worried it would get to. But perhaps kept below that signaling threshold of $100 billion on purpose, wasn't it? By excluding the big ticket items like the submarines from the budget numbers, the government potentially avoids the optics of a $100+ billion deficit, and I guarantee you, had it hit that number, the government falls. Let me put it clearly. If the government had included a full placeholder cost for this submarine fleet, say $100 billion or even $50 to $60 billion over 5 to 10 years, the deficit forecast might have looked much, much worse. That in turn would have threatened political support, especially in a minority setting where the government needs other parties, votes to pass the budget and stay afloat. Do you see what's happening here? Finally, Liberals. Because yes, there is intentional budget staging here. Announce the plan, hold off the cost until later negotiations, and that gives the Liberals wiggle room, political cover, delayed accountability, and it is a textbook delay and defer strategy to make sure that this budget did not hit a $100 billion deficit. And the subs are the smoking gun. These are going to cost $100 billion. That's the answer, right? That's your smoking gun. There's not a single dollar in there about this. Let's ask this question. Would booking the cost of 12 submarines actually say $100 billion have pushed the deficit beyond $100 billion and triggered a political collapse? The answer is quite possibly. The current deficit projection sits at around $78 billion. Add a multi-decade procurement cost that runs tens of billions of dollars, even if spread across many years, and the projected spending envelope balloons. Public opponents would scream, here's the libs spending without accountability again. Members of parliament might balk at it again. Opposition parties might vote it down, forcing either major concessions or an election again. This is what they've done. In a minority government setting, we all know this, that the Liberals currently navigate, although they tried desperately to get people across the floor as a desperation move to not have this caught, they navigate it. A dramatic deficit escalation could have triggered a loss of confidence or required new alliances, and they didn't want that. The government likely assessed that including the cost now is far too risky politically, so they deferred it. That's right, they held it out from you, and that is criminal. Here's the bottom line. The Carney Liberals are operating with style over substance. They've done this since before Mark Carney was even burst into the Liberal Party. They want to look bold on defense, tough on sovereignty with Donald Trump, caring about affordability, but they don't care about any of that. They're delivering vague commitments, announced intentions, and deferred costs, but you do get to waive that luxury tax on your jet. Ordinary Canadians are left wondering what the hell is going on here, how they handle their own pressures in their life, how submarines and inspecting photo ops and going to Germany and all these trips Mark Carney is taking have any value now. This isn't even included. This budget is indeed a giant liberal scam. Not in the sense that nothing is happening, but in the sense that the timing, the budgets, the funding are all structured to maximize optics and minimize current political risk. The real boots on the ground spending, well, it's mostly pushed into future years, including this one. Not fully accounted for today at all, not even a dollar. That is how you keep the deficiency numbers looking acceptable to the opposition while still announcing massive future plans. It's entirely a scam. It's high time Canadians demanded transparency from this government, line item funding, line by line, and real accountability. Because when you brag about climbing into submarines in August and promise you'll buy them, but then you don't even budget a penny for them, that's not leadership, folks. That's just showmanship. It's everything we've been telling you about this Liberal government proven. If you're watching this right now, I want you to ask yourself a question. Are we being led by Mark Carney or are we being sold? Because I'll tell you this budget shows us we're being sold. And if we don't stand up and hold the Liberals to account right now, the bill is going to land on our kitchen tables. It already has. Not in his photo ops, not in the Prime Minister's office. Thanks for watching Bakes on Things. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, of course, comment, have your sip of coffee, your tea. I know this stresses you out, this stuff. I apologize, but we got to keep shining the light on this kind of thing from our government. It is nonstop. It is a constant scam. They scammed the seniors on the fact that Donald Trump is a big bad wolf. They are now scamming you on their budget. Scamming is becoming part of what the Liberals do. And it has to stop because this country is falling apart. And it cannot take any more of this. Thanks for watching Bakes on Things, the first sip. We'll see you, of course, this evening around 4 o'clock for our last word. Have yourselves a fantastic Monday.